Thanks, Nick. Morning, everyone. How do you guys feel about a group selfie? Can we do it? Yeah, the old people from private equity sitting there going, oh, we're not taking it. We're taking it. Fuck it, we're taking it. Join the club. Okay, so I'm going to switch my camera around. If you can't see me, I can't see you. No pulling of zap signs. Okay, are we ready? 3, 2, I'm kind of getting everybody. 1, and there we go. Yeah, I'll put it up later on the hashtag. You didn't do anything. You just sat there. Hi everybody, thanks very much for having me. I've got 20 minutes now from what was originally 25, and I'd like to just share some thoughts and experiences around what we're doing, what we've seen, what works, what doesn't work. I thought about this conversation and we kind of pivoted around this idea of the role technology can play in helping us create a more inclusive environment. Up front, let me make a few disclaimers. So the first disclaimer is I'm almost sure I'm going to say something that's going to offend someone in this room. The interesting thing about truth is it kind of doesn't care about feelings. And so I'll just share from my perspective. If you disagree, I'm happy to engage you a bit later. The second disclaimer is I think we all are caught in a bit of a groupthink in our space and in our environment right now, and I'm hoping that some of the thoughts and ideas I'll share will allow us to break away from that a little bit. The third disclaimer is I, just like you, am operating in this space of trying to build a continent that is more inclusive, creating a broad capital base for particularly entrepreneurs to grow their businesses. And similar, actually, to what E was talking about, helping them understand that we suffer from, as I call it today, the subtle racism of low expectations. So there's this idea that if it is African or if it is black in South Africa, low expectations are part of the package. In my mind, that's bullshit. And what we almost have to call out amongst ourselves is that own internal built bias. Otherwise, we don't raise our own horizons, as it were. So that's nice. This is me when I'm, not running a VC firm. So my growth fund is the company I'll be talking about. IC is our knowledge bureau. It's a research agency which we started about 4.5 years ago. And as of 6 months ago, I now no longer run it full time. A young lady, Melissa Ontong, looks after that business, and they're doing some amazing, great stuff. I've just fired myself from my growth fund too. So there's a young man who's just joined called Trevor. He's going to be looking after that business. And engineer by training, worked in venture capital, really cool guy, and he's got some amazing stuff that he wants to do. And I'm doing all of this because next year I'm leaving the continent. I'm moving further north. I'll tell you a bit about that later. And I'll tell you why too, because it's very aligned to the work that my growth fund does. So we're all finance people in this room. When you do classical public speaking, you're taught that if you don't show finance people a graph, they almost don't take you on as intelligent. I've got 3 graphs. This is the most important one first. Clive, you're allowed to smile. There we go. So I sit today as a board member of the South African Venture Capital Association. Our firm is a member of both SAVCA as well as AVCA. There we go. Thanks, Clive. And this is an interesting graph I think I'd like us to start with. This is seminal work done by a fellow called Angus Maddison. He partnered with the United Nations and The Economist. And what they did was they studied the world's economy since the death of Jesus. It's called the Jesus Project, and the literature is freely available online. What is interesting is 69 professors worked on the project, 42 of them were not Christians. If the joke is lost on you, the inference is that they would have had to start a project based on an event they don't believe happened. And they studied the world's economy for 2,000 years, and they framed the study on this thing called GDP, a function of total economic activity. You notice, and you see it in the darker blue line, global GDP between the 1st and 20th century has this massive exponential rise. But notice between the 1st and kind of the 17th century, it's quite a linear growth of rate. And one of the challenges I think we face in our space today is how we've used models of finance to capitalize businesses created in the West in the 20th century, when much of where the Africa is actually isn't there yet. And so we're often talking about the disconnect between the type of capital we provide and the stage of businesses that we're in. Talk to any entrepreneur who's raising Series A or seed funding, and they'll tell you exactly what I'm talking about. The lighter blue graph is global life expectancy. Human beings today are living longer than they ever have. I want you to consider this, the wonders of modern medicine. You know, 100 years ago, if you had the common flu, it could kill you. Today, if you have the common flu, you go to the local doctor. In fact, you don't even go to the doctor. You go to the local Dischem or Clicks if you're South African. You buy your ACC 200, your Corenza C, and your Barocca. You go home and you self-medicate. You open up your cupboard, and in there you've got medication, which you're not allowed to have, but you're running your own pharmacy too. It's a true story. My mom has paracetamol that expired in 1996. I asked her, Mom, why do you still have the paracetamol? She says, because paracetamol doesn't expire, it evolves. I have dololo clue what that means. So the world today is wealthier than it's ever been, and human beings are healthier than they've ever been. There has never been a better time to be the species called a human being on this little rock of ours called planet Earth. If this is true, and my argument here is that it is, then explain to me too why it is that our world today is probably more unequal than it's been since the wonders of our modern economic system. We talk about the rich getting richer and the poor poorer, and somewhere in the middle, and excuse my comment, but it is true, there has developed over the past 100 years this deeply incestuous relationship between black poverty and white guilt. And somewhere in the middle, with good intention, we're all, I think, are running over ourselves, often to do things that are often just unsustainable. Let me say it for you simply, if I may. Africa doesn't need pity. It needs opportunity. And I think a part of what we need to do is to talk about how do we create mechanisms that create and broaden access, but most importantly, democratize opportunity, rather than consistently fall over ourselves from a pity perspective. It's done with good intention, but it is and has limiting outcomes. There's a painful truth. So, I don't want to get into this. What I thought I'd do, I thought I'd frame for you some of the macros, because I think even over the past 50 years, if you don't understand often how the continent has shifted, my view is you then don't understand how the continent is going to shift going forward into the next 50 years, right? So what I'll do is I'll give you three economies, South, West, and East, and I'll show you what's happened in the macros of those economies. Most particularly, I'll focus on economic exports of those economies, the three largest contributors of those economies from an export perspective. Let's go first to Angola. Hands up if you've been to Angola. Beautiful part of the world. If you've never been, go. By the way, for those of you who don't know, the world's most expensive burger, 2018 and 2017, was in Angola. $69. No lettuce, no tomatoes, no cheese. You had to pay extra for that too. But it's interesting what's happened to the Angolan economy. In 1962, the three largest exports in Angola were coffee, fiber, and flowers. But fast forward 50 years, and it had shifted to petroleum over 90%, and then diamonds and industrial diamonds. So what a lot of us are doing today is we're working with startups who work in these ecosystems, and we're building these great little products and investing in them for a 5-year view, and we often don't understand that even the economies they're operating in are growing so fast that the economy is shifting. If you're in Ghana, Ghana's a 6.8% growth economy. We took a beating, a great position in a distribution business in Nigeria. When I first started my growth fund, that's at 2014. That business hasn't done quite what we thought it would do because the fundamentals at a macroeconomic level have shifted. I was sharing with, before I got up here, somebody said to me, I like your socks. These are really, really cool socks. I wear them everywhere I go because this was an interesting business called Gauss Culture. Two young South African entrepreneurs, and we put in 500,000 Rand, and the business went belly up. I got, for my 500,000 Rand, 50 pairs of socks. It's the most expensive set of socks I've ever bought. So as a result, I wear them everywhere. This is now my IRR. So that's Angola. Let's come home to South Africa. Beautiful, beautiful South Africa. 1962, look at this. This one is actually very interesting. We were woolen, fleece, maize, and ores. So most people think the South African economy was always based in mining. Not actually true. Until 1962, only iron ore was the top 3 exporters out of South Africa. That shifted over the past 50 years. Gold, metals, and then diamonds. So the question is, where are we in another 50 years' time? If you want to answer that question, you have to travel to a beautiful country called Morocco. Anyone here been to Morocco? Please go if you haven't. I can't guarantee you'll make it back, but you have to make the journey. Beautiful part of the world, Morocco, by the way, it equals South Africa. It's similar to South Africa in terms of its Gini coefficient. There are people in Morocco who are incredibly wealthy, and then there's just everybody else. But look at Morocco if you would. Aluminium, ores, and tomatoes. You notice that almost the entire export sector is based on what we call stuff from the ground. How we build an economy for the future is stuff from here. So it's not just about extractionary economies, but knowledge-based economies. And what has happened in Morocco? It's become a knowledge-based economy, bar the fertilizer industry. The fertilizer industry, by the way, is incredibly technical. Fertilizer companies also make explosives for mining houses. It's a great, very technical industry to be in. So the continent, my point is, it's shifting. If the continent is shifting, and I've argued here that it is, then what's the gap around where you and I find each other? And I think the gap is that we're all looking at this elephant of enterprise growth, accelerating startups, Africa 2.0, and we're all holding a different part of the elephant and are not talking to each other. So those of us who run VC firms don't generally have great relationships with private equity firms. How do you know somebody's actually in private equity? Ask them if they've ever earned a carry. Every other person is just a practitioner in truth. And then you've got to ask yourself, how many VCs actually exit a VC investment to the traditional capital markets as opposed to exit to another VC firm? There's challenges there too. So a lot of us are creating firms so we can exit to each other. Somewhere in the middle are a group of people who are doing phenomenal work called accelerators. We have one. They do amazing work. They help organizations embed deep technical expertise. But often that deep technical expertise is disconnected from the strategy of a capital growth of that business. And amongst the most chief of these challenges is finding really good, competent people, well-educated, who understand that the continent is a long-term play. The truth is, most of us get the Queen's English, get the education, and then go further north. There's a beautiful indie fable that talks about the elephant and the 6 blind men, and the fable argues very simply that if you took 6 blind men and positioned them around the elephant, asked them to hold a different part of the elephant, and then asked them each what they're holding, they would give you an answer that felt personally true but was holistically false. So for the person holding the tail, they might think they're holding a snake, for instance. Very quickly, probably put it down. The one holding the tree trunk, the one holding the leg might think they're holding a tree trunk. Maybe the one holding the ear might think they're holding the leaf of a palm tree. Because they're blind, if they don't ask the question, is there somebody else here? What are you holding? What does it feel like? And through a system of connected intelligence, they will miss the point that they're each holding a different part of the elephant. My view is this is very much where our ecosystem is today. So if you look at the work we're doing in South Africa, East Africa, West Africa, we're often disconnected around our ability to do a very simple knowledge share. Best practice, what's working, what's not working. I had a conversation last night with a friend of mine, Sim Shagai, a very interesting guy who built a company called Conga. And first time I met with Sim, Harvard MBA, really, really smart man. He's now built a second business. He exited Conga to Naspers. So I went over to him and I'm like, Sim, this business you're doing is amazing. And Conga, if you want to think about it, was like a competitor to Jumia. It was an Amazon, but for the African continent. Really, really great business. And so I went and I was like, tell me about your business, your learning, your story, the tech platform. And he said, Vusi, I actually learned 18 months into the business that I wasn't building a technology business, I was building a distribution business. So help me understand that. He says, you can sell anything online. Africa's challenge is not about whether or not you get people to transact. It's how do you fulfill. So in the Yobe province, for instance, where those 200 young girls were kidnapped by Boko Haram, do you know why they were never found for like 2 years? It's because there's no mapping of that area. You can't put it in your GPS and turn left. So if somebody buys from that area, how do you fulfill the order? The disconnect between understanding the realities of our market and building solutions that operate for those realities. And I think many tech investments are running that risk today. We're building tech businesses for Cape Towns and Joburgs and Lagoses, when actually much of the continent is just not that. It's just not that. So for a bit of context, I thought I'd share with you what I think are the 4 things we really need to look at. The first is the investment approach. I think we need to have a strong conversation about the investment approach many of us are taking in this ecosystem. And to prove the point, I'm going to give you both a case study. You're all finance people, so you'll like this. Let's analyze some numbers. Clive, second graph. This one is just for you. Have a look at this. 2 companies you're all very aware of, you know them, called Amazon and Alibaba. My argument here is very simple. Imagine that each of these companies were trading of a share price of $1, and I gave you $1 and I said, buy either one of these shares. Which would you buy? Hands up if you would buy Alibaba. Hands up if you'd buy Amazon. Hands up if you're not going to put your hand up no matter what I say. What you see from this graph is that Alibaba, of a 20% base, in other words, Amazon is 5 times the revenue of Alibaba, is generating almost, Amazon is 5 times the revenue of Alibaba, is generating almost identical net profit. The approach most of us are taking is the approach that would invest in the Alibaba, right? Because from what you're seeing here, it's a more efficient business, it's generating better returns. But what are you not seeing? And this is the point Jeff Bezos has made ad infinitum. The point is, he deliberately runs losses to claw market share and to push out competitors so they can develop other adjacencies. To prove the point, this is revenue to net income of Amazon. You notice, since 1997, even though their revenue has grown exponentially, they have maintained an almost flat net income. It's not that the business is not profitable, it's that he's deliberately doing it. Now, how many of us here would be able to invest and keep capital invested in an asset from 97 to 2018? I often make the point, Mark Zuckerberg is a great kid, but he's not amazing. If any of you were able to run a tech business where you could, for the first 7 years, make 0 income and still have capital to invest, of course you'd build an Amazon. So what's really missing, and the reason an Elon Musk can't happen in Africa and he has to move to the US, is because the way we provision capital, make capital available, but most importantly, our time horizons for investing capital is in truth a massive part of the problem. When we started our firm, we were very clear. We're an on-balance sheet fund. We put in our own capital because we wanted to see if we could prove the hypothesis. Taken a couple of beatings, but somewhere in there, there's been some very interesting learnings. The second is we have to have a look at the education gap. This is South Africa alone, and this is the provision as well as acquisition of education by province. These are not my numbers. These are Stats SA. Notice something very interesting, which is almost across the country. There is a massive drop-off between people who have access to primary level education and tertiary level education. So as a consequence, what we actually call entrepreneurs are often people who are incidental into it. That's why they are survivalist and often low growth. Try explaining EBITDA, the difference between net and gross margins, to somebody with a primary level education. When we started doing this, one of the very interesting things I learned up front was actually we thought we would invest in these entrepreneurs. That was what they needed. They needed an education. They need you to sit them down and explain to them, what do you mean by value chain? What is a value chain? And just to be clear, and I want everybody here to hear me correctly, they are not unintelligent. They are miseducated. There is, although subtle, a critical difference. These are people that once you explain the concept, they get it completely. It's that they didn't understand the concept was there in the first place. If we, as South Africans, by the way, and I'm speaking South Africans specifically in the room, don't get this right, I have news for you. You've got groot kak coming. I'm telling you now, and I say it as a joke, but I'm telling you for free, you've got a big, big problem coming. Because you cannot correct any part of the macroeconomic picture unless you address the education question first. So as a consequence, we started doing some education stuff because we were just like, well, you can't find it anywhere, so let's do it. The reason I was actually talking to Sim the other day is because he's got an online education platform that we're looking to bring into some of the stuff we're doing. My view is if you're in this room and you're operating in the capital markets and you're making investments, for free, try platform, not competition. I'm actively looking for other people in the ecosystem to partner with because I recognize the only way I can manage downside risk is if I spread it as often and as freely as I can. Most of us, I think, are trying to hang on to unicorns rather than try and spread the risk. The third, this is specifically South African, is how many opportunistic BBBE players there are. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but have you noticed that everyone that was doing share-based investments in the 90s is now all of a sudden enterprise supply development? All of a sudden there's like 50,000 enterprise supply development. They were buying shares in the 90s and sitting on boards. Now they want to tell entrepreneurs how to build a business. But comrade, how? You didn't do it. Now, this is not the point that I've made. There's actual empirical evidence to prove this. Between the year 2000 and 2014, 376 billion rand went in to the black economic empowerment structures. These were all the share-based structures. What could we do if they gave us that amount of money today to invest in startups? Just imagine the multiplier effect. And so what I'm seeing today is we're doing this mistake, but all over again. What we're doing is we're creating these ESD programs that are more actually about the agency cost than the impact. So the ESD company has very nice, fantastic offices, very well-paid people, great bonuses, but if you trickle down and look at what's happening in underlying impact, there's perhaps an audit that needs to be done there. And I'm saying this publicly because I think if those of us who are in this space don't call it out, we enable it, and as a function of it, are implicit in it. It's really, really important that we depoliticize black economic empowerment. Let me just speak to South Africans very quickly. Black economic empowerment is not new. So if I hear one more person complain about it, I'm going to clap you. In the early 1900s, the English had it. It was called English economic empowerment. That's how they built Mutual and Federal, the oldest insurance company in Africa. That's where Standard Bank comes from. It's 150 years old. The 1948, when the National Party took power, the Nats took power, they created it too. It was called AEE, Afrikaans Economic Empowerment. Where do you think Santam and Sanlam comes from? They were built as competitors to Momentum and Metropolitan. So just so we're clear, this is not happening for the first time. Please stop moaning. What it is about broadening access so that you don't have to deal with this issue. I think for all of us in this room, our single most important call of action should be, how do we make sure that when our kids grow up, they don't have to grow up in a society where BEE matters? So if you have to take a bit of a clap now, take it, because it is about building for the future of the country. And then I think lastly is a conversation for us to have about what do we need to do to make sure that we get this. The last is infrastructure gap. There's a massive infrastructure gap. So if you think about where we provision most businesses, where we finance most businesses, and the kind of underlying infrastructure those businesses need, it's difficult actually for most of them in many parts of the continent. I think it's well known, we built a hub in Thohoyandou, one of the most beautiful parts of South Africa, beautiful peri-urban area. We invested 11 million rand in this beautiful state-of-the-art infrastructure hub with great Wi-Fi and free working spaces and all these things. And our first most important problem after we built it was that we could only get a GPRS signal. Now it's great to build a hub and invest 11 million rand and then say to people, which we did do, that London School of Economics, where I'm an alum, freely offered curriculum and professors to teach entrepreneurs in our hub. Now, can you think about that? Comrades, just pause. We took a hub in Thohoyandou and connected professors in London, in one of the top 10 business schools in the world, to teach entrepreneurs for free. And the main challenge we had was Wi-Fi signal. Like, if we don't address the infrastructure gap, you can come with as many great solutions as you can, but it's like what Sim said. I'm not actually building an online business, I'm building a distribution business. Because if I get the fulfillment right, then I'll win. This is, guys, I'm almost done. This is me showboating now. I want to show you some of the case studies of some of the entrepreneurs and businesses we worked with. This is a couple called Papa and Hetty. They run a fashion business. They do like African print. I was supposed to be wearing one of their stuff, but my thing is dirty. Papa is an actuary by training. Hetty was a business analyst. Both worked at a bank, left, and they went and created this business that does African print. Coup de grace. They were featured on Top Billing. So I phoned them and I said, you bastards, I've never been on Top Billing. Right? This is very quickly. I'll show you like a 30-second clip of their story. Watch this.
Drawing on the African wax print heritage, P&H Boutique's modern traditional wear is handmade and captures the spirit of the couple who creates these colorful garments.
Papa and Hetty, it's so wonderful to finally meet the power couple behind P&H Boutique. Where did that idea come about?
When we got married in 2010, we just had this idea on our honeymoon.
Yeah.
That we'd like to start a business together someday. And this isn't even what we started off with.
We actually started in the spare bedroom of our house, if you can believe that or not. We were both working in corporate and really kind of juggling running a small business as well as working in corporate. We followed a lot of Robert Kiyosaki's model, who is the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, until we were able to grow our business to what it is now. 5 stores later,
When they came and joined our program, they had 1 store. When they were on Top Billing, they had 5 stores. Today, they're at 7 stores. Great multiplier. So I said to Papa and Hetty both, I said to them, so guys, you've built the amazing platform. Now what we can do is think about how do we leverage and use technology to broaden access to your goods and services. The technology is a platform. It's not the solution. Our second business, this is an interesting one. Some of you here might know of it. It's called Bloomable. It's called SA Florist. We've been in this one since 2014. And it's just one of those that no matter how hard you try, you just can't exit. Clive, come see me after this. Maybe you can buy it off me. You know, it's just, I saw Kiat here earlier. Maybe somebody else who runs a fund here can take it off our hands. But Bloomable has been a fantastic business. It really has been a fantastic business. The hypothesis for Bloomable was very simple. Build a platform where florists can transact, and off the platform where florists can transact, you allow florists in the main, in low, small towns, to actually compete with the large florist providers in South Africa. Great business. And the market, the total addressable market, is something like 600 billion rand. So it's not as if there's no opportunity for the business on the upside. The challenge for this business today is how does it grow and how does it accelerate growth? But really what it's done is it's created for florists, just like Masana here, an amazing platform where she can compete. Because as a one-man band, she wasn't able to, but today she can. So let me wrap up. I've shared with you, I think, a couple of thoughts around the growth of the world, shift in the continent, spoken, I think, some unkind truths about how we're seeing things. And I've asked if for nothing else that we think about how do we collaborate rather than compete. I think probably the most important thing is we maybe have to shift our perspective. Lou, is that you? There he is. Lou, by the way, is one of our investors, one of the investors on Bloomable, and actually he runs the whole thing. So maybe Lou, you should be up here giving them the case study, but you know, white work, black credit, I'll take it. Do you see what I did there? Do you see what I did there? You're allowed to laugh. That's actually funny. It's okay. So what? I think maybe the main challenge for all of us is just to think about what it is that we're aiming for. I think too many of us are thinking about the sort of Kravitz model of private equity and venture capital. Build this thing and make it as big as possible. And I think what we should rather be trying to do is to be the best at what we're doing rather than be the biggest at what we're doing. In my mind, size shouldn't be what we're chasing. Not capital under assets, not assets under management or capital deployed, or any of those. It should be about how effective and efficient are you and how do we measure the impact that you're having in those businesses. And I know that's a controversial point, so I thought I would prove it to you. Hands up if you ever had a Nokia. Hands up if you have one today. Hands up if you had a BlackBerry. Have one today? Yeah. What is interesting is, all of you that had your hands up when I asked you if you had a Nokia, hands up if you knew who the Nokia CEO was. Hands up if you knew what their strategy was. Product release strategy. Market entry strategy. Hands up if you cared. Isn't that interesting? Often the mistake we make, I think, is we presume that that which matters to us then therefore necessarily matters to our market. I don't think the market needs us to be the biggest at anything. The market just needs us to be the best at what we do. And sometimes being the best is about working with partners, learning every single day. You know, we are kind of learning this tech thing, but we know that we work with other limited general partners in this space who know tech far better than we do. We're willing to learn every single day. I'm done. I wanted to leave you with a quick point about this incredible man. I had the privilege of meeting him twice. The first time I met him, I just won the World Championship in public speaking. So I went over to his office in Houghton, and I went and met him, and Zelda Lagrange came to meet me at reception. Zelda was his receptionist. And she came to me, she said, "Hi, are you Mr. Vusi? By the way, it's Vusi Thembekwayo. Another point that I need to make here, if you are South African or African, and you live in any part of this continent and have done for most of your life, you have, but I mean zero excuse, not to know how to say black names. Like, it's not funny, it's not even overlookable. You know, this is interesting, but when you're born, the first thing the parents give you after your doctor assigns your weight is a name. I know I've got 3 kids. When you go to prison, the first thing they take from you after you've removed your laces is your name, and they replace it with a number. So the very basis of my humanity is my name. And maybe we should just commit here that we're going to learn how to say each other's names. Yeah? Now, you know what's interesting is the woke crowd is like, yeah, tell them. Tell them! And then outside they were going, geez, I can't believe he said that. That's so controversial. Anyway, look, you know, Vusi, you need to learn how to say it. Kakambile, you can take an advanced course, but Vusi, you know. Anyway, so I'm sitting in Nelson Mandela's study. I'm waiting for him to come and meet me. And Nelson, I'm 6'2". I wear size 11 shoes. I'm 103, 104 kilos. I can hold my own in a scrum. Nelson Mandela was 6'5", wore size 13. When people talk about the man being a giant, he wasn't just that in the humanitarian sense. He was a giant physically. So he walks into the study, he had a very heavy walk. Almost all of you here walk with the heel of your foot. Nelson Mandela, owing to the number of years he spent breaking down rocks in Robben Island and what it would do to tire his thighs and his knees, learned how to walk with the ball of his foot first to relieve pressure. So he had a very heavy walk. You heard him coming. So I'm sitting in the study, At this time, Zelda has served me a cup of tea. And she asked me, would I like tea? I said, yes. She said, what tea would you like? I didn't know what she meant. She said, would you like jasmine or Earl Grey? I asked her, who's Jasmine? And then she brought me some tea with eat some more biscuits. I thought that was a bit of racial profiling, the eat some more biscuits. To the non-South Africans, we'll explain that to you later. It's interesting, the marketing trick they've pulled on us, actually, because I tasted Woolworths shortbread biscuits the other day. That shit is eat some more. It's half the size, twice the price. Marketers. Anyway, so I'm sitting drinking my cup of coffee. I'm very nervous. Every time I pick it up, it spills on the saucer. Nelson Mandela walks to the door. He knocks on it. He takes 2 steps forward. He opens up his arms and he says, my son, come here. My father had died fairly recent to that, and nobody had called me my son since. And I remember when he said it, I felt my chest tighten up and my throat clogged up. And then I felt heat rush through my cheeks up towards my forehead, and I knew what was going to happen next. Salt water was going to run out of my eyes. It's a chemical process called crying. And right at that moment, and this is a true story, the only thought I had in my mind, the only thought was, Vusi, do not, as a Zulu man, let a Xhosa man see you cry. That was genuinely the only thought in my mind. That was it. So I'm just about to start crying. He's standing, arms ajar, and I leapt up almost over the table and I gave him a hug. To be clear, at my height, even when I stilted, my face was on his sternum. That's how big he was. Gives me this big hug. Then we sit down. When my mom sent me for the meeting, she gave me 3 explicit instructions. She said, look smart, sound intelligent, don't embarrass me. And the only way to do this, my mom said, was if I said nothing but asked really telling questions. So the whole time I said nothing, I just asked questions. We're 58 minutes into the meeting. There's a knock on the door. Zelda peeks her head, which is, I've come to learn, a sign from your EA that it's time to call it a wrap. He looks at me and he says, you know, they said you are a speaker. I said, yebo tata, which is Xhosa for granddad. He says, but man, you have not spoken. Then he says, have you any final questions? This question was my coup de grace. This was the one I prepared on that trip, which took 4 taxi rides in 3.5 hours. The infrastructure gap. And so I said to him, Tata, what is your hope for South Africa? He said, South Africans need a little bit of faith. I asked, what is faith? He said, faith is the ability to believe in the impossible, to see the invisible, and to trust in the unknown. I'd like to leave that with you and ask that no matter what you do in this ecosystem and environment you work in, try and find the reason to do it rather than the reason not to. There's more than enough reason not to transact, but if we move from a premise of faith, we'll find the opportunities. Thank you very much for having had me here. Merci beaucoup.
But today I don't see no